Labour Party have proposed that we should be moving as a country towards Plan B. Now you might be wondering what the hell is Plan B? Well, basically, there have been sort of laid out in pretty sort of simplistic, quite digestible terms, to be fair, a Plan A for the UK's dealing with coronavirus this year, or at least this sort of autumn, winter time, and a Plan B. Now, Plan A is basically all about trying to get people to get booster jabs and things like that. It's all about kind of the vaccination process. But Plan B is basically as follows. So face coverings will become compulsory in some settings. So that would probably be like on public transport, in supermarkets, maybe even, like things like gigs or stuff like that. Powers to introduce vaccine passports. So for things like gigs, you can only get in if you have a vaccine passport, or you can only get in if you wear a mask. It might be one or the other. Encouraging people to work from home, which obviously is the total opposite of what the government's been doing for a while now, which is telling people get back to work, get back to the office, get back to wherever. And communicating the need for caution. And as pathetic as that one sounds, it is very important because, in countries where governments have really, really stressed the importance of being cautious, and they've been quite unified in that regard, things have been, generally people's behaviour has been more responsible, and generally there have been fewer cases and fewer deaths. So Labour want the government to implement that pretty much immediately. That's what Rachel Reeves said on Andrew Marr, on the Andrew Marr show. And I understand exactly why they think that and why that needs, and to be honest, I think that needs to be done. I think potentially, there are some organisations, some medical organisations now that are talking about how maybe we need to implement some restrictions as winter is approaching. And I think, it's important we always listen to the scientists and take heed of what the scientists are saying. But what is important from that report that was done on the UK's coronavirus response, what we have to make, what the government has to do is branch out and make sure it gets scientific advice from many different sources, right? Because one of the problems from our original response at the beginning of the pandemic in 2020 was the government, by and large, followed the scientific advice. But the advice was bad, right? The advice was bad. And instead of looking at, what are they doing in New Zealand, what they're doing in South Korea, what are they doing in Japan, let's have a look at what they're doing in Canada, what are they doing in this country, that country, etc. We sort of just thought, well, we have the best scientists, we'll know exactly, how to deal with this, and we didn't take heed of warnings from other countries like Italy and things, and we dealt with the pandemic very badly. It's without a doubt that the UK has had the worst pandemic response in Europe. Certainly in Western Europe, and I think when you look at the death toll, you look at the deaths per million, you look at our population density and our population size, but you also compare that to, and we have, all the things to do with our healthcare capabilities and things like that, the size of our economy, all of those factors, it's pretty clear to see we have catastrophically failed. And it's not really the general public's fault, I don't think. Yes, some people in the UK have a ridiculous notion of freedom that means I want to go out and do whatever I want, even if it's going to endanger the lives of other people. But most people, would have acted more rationally had the government been better with the advice, had, the government been better with the messaging and things like that. So it's important to take into account scientific advice. As long as you're making sure you're getting a diverse array of opinions, not in terms of what the opinions actually are, but just in terms of where they come from. You know, don't entirely focus on just doctors that are from Britain, on just a certain type of doctor or whatever, right? That seems obvious, but the government didn't really do that at the beginning of the pandemic in 2020. We like to act now, I think, like COVID is just gone, like it doesn't exist, and the pandemic's over. It's not. I hate being the bearer of bad news. You know, you might not believe that I hate it because I do it so often on this show, but I do hate it, and I really wish I could say, yeah, the pandemic's done now, it's over. But for a myriad of different reasons, it's not over. It's not over because of the nature of this virus. You know, it's a rapidly mutating coronavirus that is just very hard to stamp out because of, you know, I mean, we know all the reasons. I mean, you guys will have been constantly bombarded with the same pieces of information about it, how you can be infected and contagious but not know, you know, because you don't have any symptoms and all these things. We were hearing that from, you know, in the early weeks of the pandemic in 2020, but that has meant that this is something that's going to be a feature of our lives for a very long time. But also, you know, our government's response has been very poor. And then there's the vaccine issue with so many anti-vaxxers scuttling around, you know, spreading their lies and their misinformation and propaganda. So I think, unfortunately, Plan B has to be implemented. That's my view. I think, you know, we need to make masks essential. They need to be mandatory on public transport. I think vaccine passports is a weird one. I'll be totally honest with you all, I still don't really know where I stand on it, because I very much understand the arguments for and against. I think maybe we should, just because this is a potentially this is a very dangerous issue. It could spiral, and we could be looking at cancelling Christmas again, which would just be horrendous. Because, you know, not just because, we don't get to spend Christmas with your family and give them a hug and stuff, but also because, I mean, why would that happen? It would happen because there's already been a lot of suffering, a lot of death previously. And we need to avoid that. The government has been too late every single time. And I think Labour's right to call for an immediate shift to Plan B. But Rachel Reeves was right to point out as well, said that, you know, she said that we shouldn't let the government off the hook when it comes to Plan A either, because they failed on those terms as well. So, surprise, surprise, the Conservative government in this country is failing at its most basic duties. Who would have thought? I want to hear your thoughts on this issue, as always. Leave them in the comments if you want. I think that, you know, this could be a less bleak winter than last winter, but, you know, we just have to hope that the government makes the right decisions and that people are being sensible. So thank you very much for watching, as always, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.